Welcome to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. This is where we talk about anything and everything that can help you show up as the best version of yourself in your life, because we do not want you just surviving on autopilot through your life. We want you to absolutely thrive. And you know who thrives quite often is my producer, Aaron Bender.
I'm just over here thriving in the corner. You
are thriving. You are.
Yeah, I don't know what plant doesn't need sunlight to thrive in the corner, but that's me.
You seem to make it. Yes.
I appreciate it. And by the way, we have Marriage Coach Tommy McCollister coming up on the episode today. And I appreciate that you have this Instagram algorithm that I love. It's all about, helping you be your better self.
Yes.
Like this podcast, Made for More.
Yes. Yes.
But why is a divorce lawyer helping people in their marriages? Why?
I know, right? I'm going to put myself out of business.
Yeah. Seriously, though, like, what is attracting you to a lot of these guests? Take us behind the scenes. Like, what really for you is like, you know what? I like this person's content enough to be like, hey, let's talk for a little while about it.
Yeah. I think part of the deal is like being a divorce lawyer. It has been sort of one big human experiment and study into relationship dynamics. And I really find it so fascinating because I think it's one of the most complicated things that we as human beings experience is like an interpersonal relationship. And you know what? I am totally fine with trying to put myself out of business because I'll find something else to do, guys. Don't worry about me. But if I can save a marriage, like, hey, I'm happy. Okay, Tommy, welcome to the show. So nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Holly.
So, I forgot. I got to introduce you. I am here with Tommy McCollister, marriage coach, high-level husband. He is an elite coach, speaker, and man. So let's just like jump right in, Tommy. 4 years ago, you were suicidal and growing weed.
Yeah, pretty crazy, right? And it's still kind of surreal when you give me that intro like that when I hear it, like, because it's been 4 years, which has been a wild, long journey. Super grateful, but also it doesn't really seem like that long ago that my life was in a completely different spot. But I own everything that you say right there, and I'm completely stand in authority with it. And so no ego on that, just really grateful for where I'm at. But it's been a wild journey because it's only been 4 years. Yeah, I was living in Northern California 4 years ago, growing weed for a living, and in a completely different spot.
You and I have never met, but I've seen your content on Instagram. Mm-hmm. We were introduced by Frank Ortega, who was on the podcast and has amazing things to share and amazing value to share. He introduced us, and your content is really just all about like how to be this high-level husband, be super present for your wife, keep your marriage spicy and hot. So how did you go from just really like 4 years is not that long. So how did you go from just 4 years ago growing weed, you felt suicidal, to what you are now?
I had a near-death experience, and it was the greatest day of my life, honestly, by far. So honestly, I was living in Northern California, a little small town called Eureka by the Oregon border, 5 hours north of San Francisco. And ironically enough, so I live in Las Vegas now, but I was in Las Vegas for a BMX event. I raced BMX bikes on the national circuit, but I had taken a couple years off, and I came back for the first national of the season, and I crashed very first lap and punctured my lung, smashed 5 ribs, separated my shoulder. I was knocked unconscious, and I spent time in the trauma ICU here in Las Vegas. And on the way to the hospital, I was in the back of the ambulance and was thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm going to die, because like I couldn't breathe at all. And then the way the paramedics were talking, I just thought like, this is it. I'm that dude at 39 who's going to die. My wife's in the front of the ambulance. I got 2 young kids at home. At that time, I think they were probably 13 and 9, roughly in those ages. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm dead. I'm that guy. And what is my life came to? Because I wasn't like always this weed grower, but I had an experience which is 8 years prior of like why I became that. And whatnot. And in that moment, I'm super faith-filled, and as you probably got that from Frank as well.
Yes.
And I didn't feel God 1% in my life at that time, which was super scary because God's number one in my life. And the
Right.
reason why I didn't film is because 8 years prior, I actually heard his voice for the very first time in my life, and he told me not to do it. I did it anyways. I got money, I got trips, I had free time, and I hated my life because I got all the things of the world, and none of those things of the world brought me any happiness because I didn't love myself.
Right.
And so when I was laying in the hospital, I thought to myself, wow, this is quite the life you've built for yourself. Your kids are back home living in a grow house while me and my wife at that time are in Las Vegas, and I might be dying. Like, is this what I'm going to be known for? Is this what I'm brought here on this earth for? Is this what I've overcome 20 years before? Like all the hard things I'd been through 20 years earlier. And I thought to myself, dude, I can't keep doing this. This past 8 years of my life have been terrible. So at that moment, which was the beginning of 2020 in January. So as you
Oh
know,
boy.
2020 became a fun roller coaster for us all, but it was the best year of my life
Yes.
because of COVID. And so when COVID hit, that was the final thing. And me and my wife said, yo, it's time to switch things up.
Yeah. Create a different life, basically, right?
Yeah.
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 So, okay, so you describe yourself as a high-level husband. So, tell us like from your point of view, what is the role of a husband?
Well, to be a leader in multiple different ways, to set the tone for the family. One of my favorite words that I like to use is called like setting the standard, right? Like, especially in the society that we live in today, it's all about, hey, how can we lower our standards to meet everybody else's rather than raising everybody else up to our standards? Not because
Right.
we're better than them, because it's just a better way of life. Like if we really look around at the country right now, 50% divorce rate,
Yes.
65% obesity rate,
Yes.
97% of Americans are struggling with either a physical or a mental illness. So it's really
Wow.
not working out for us too well right now when we're saying, hey, let's lower
Right.
the standards to meet everybody else. So
Yeah.
I'm all about raising the standards. And so as the husband, it's about setting the tone for the family, that's for our kids, right? Because
Yeah.
what is caught is taught. So for our kids, if we're not setting the standards for them, where are they learning it from? From school, from the world, from all of that. And if the marriage isn't going well, what are they learning? That this is what a marriage looks like: arguing, no intimacy, no fun, no joy. Well, then they're going to
Right.
repeat those same exact processes. So as a man, the way I always look at it, it's up to us to set the standard, not demand respect, but command the respect from who we are, how we love ourselves, how we lead ourselves. And because we're leading ourselves so well, that just bleeds over into everybody else and shows that I have so much fruit coming from me that why wouldn't they want that fruit as well in my wife and other people, and then my kids and then others as well. So it's just about setting the tone in that. And by that, it opens the door for it to really happen in so many other areas.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. So how did you how did you learn about this? How did you know that that's what you like now? How did you come to the realization like, okay, this is the role I need to be fulfilling now? When just like 4 short years ago, it sounds like you were maybe fulfilling a different, you were not fulfilling that role in the same way, maybe.
Yeah. Well, so me and my wife have been together for 25 years now, married for 17. And we kind of have a little bit of a rocky ride the first 4.5 years. Granted, she was 17 and I was 18 when we got together. And so those first 4 years, we were barely just figuring out life and all
Yeah.
those things. And when we were dating then, I had cheated on her. I was a drug addict. I had like done a bunch of bad things, let's just put it that way. And so we had split up for 18 months. And when we got back together, like that's when I like found God and my life really started changing. I started leading myself well. I started removing friends from my life. But I still was living in Northern California. It was just such an impoverished area. I didn't know what was possible in life. I felt like, well, this is just the
Mm,
cards that I'm dealt. I have to work a regular job and this is what it's going to be. I
right.
didn't know you could ever pursue dreams. I thought that was for specific people. And so we
Oh.
had a good marriage. I would say a good marriage. Like we had a decent amount of sex, like okay sex. It wasn't great, but it wasn't
Hmm.
bad, like decent amount. We didn't really argue after the first couple of years of marriage. We didn't really argue.
Hmm.
So we had a good marriage, I would say. But good's oftentimes is the robber of great, right? And so even in those years of those 8 years that my life was in not in a great spot of, like I was saying, when I was growing weed, we still weren't in a bad spot with each other. I just didn't love myself. And because I didn't love myself, I wasn't showing her to love herself, how to lead herself. She worked a job that was barely above minimum wage. She didn't enjoy any aspect of personal development or growth. So she stayed the same. And so that's
Okay.
kind of where we were. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? And
Yes.
so when that, what I realized was like, I don't want my life to look like this when I'm 65, and I don't want my marriage to look like this because my best friend wasn't my wife at the time. We spent a decent amount of time, but we were really kind of bored with each other in a lot of
Okay.
different ways. And so when that happened, and honestly, when COVID happened, what was one of the cool byproducts of COVID was then we had to spend a lot of more time together. Well, we started going on a
Yes.
and for a lot of people, that wasn't good. For me and my
I was
wife,
gonna
it was a
say, yeah,
blessing.
we saw the other side of that. Divorce rates had never been higher.
Yeah, well, yeah, people didn't do the things that they're supposed to, but they're also not taught those things, and so it's
Right.
understandable. But we started going on an intentional nightly walk every single by ourselves every single night, and we've still continued that up until this day. And because of that, we got to know each other. And when you get to know each other, she gets to know what's going on in my heart. I get to know what's going on in hers. She didn't know I was struggling all those years, that I hated my life, that all these things that I was doing. She didn't know I wasn't thriving because she saw it, that I wasn't like the guy that I used to be that was just joking and playful at all times. But so when I finally got to that spot and we started going on intentional quality time every single day, non-negotiable, I finally started sharing. I started getting vulnerable with her. I started telling what was going on in my heart. Well, then she knew why maybe I was being quiet at times or
Yeah.
why this was happening in my life. Then she started feeling comfortable sharing those things with me. Because one of the biggest things I see in couples is they don't really know each other. You do life, you live together, you're business partners, sometimes you're lovers, you raise kids, you do all that, but you don't really know what's going on the inside of their lives. So when we started doing that, we got to know each other. And when we got to know each other, good things really, really started happening in our lives. But it was cool because even in those years when we weren't thriving, I would say, we were still always that couple that people came to and were asking, like, hey, how do you guys make it work? It seems like you guys don't argue. Or how do you make it work? You guys' intimacy on it. And we were just kind of giving them the small tips then. Little
Yeah.
did I know that was just the points that were just showing me, hey, this is what God's really trying to do in our life and what I'm trying, like God wants us to move into. So I already had a solid foundation. And then when I really turned up the heat on my personal development on all of that, and we did all the things that make for an amazing man, and then that bled over into my wife, we created an amazing marriage because of that as well. So
Awesome. So I know from like looking at your Instagram content, you guys actually do a post talking about your intimacy and how, it went from like pretty good, like no major complaints to like really good. And I saw that I think your wife said, it was because she started feeling better about herself. So what was the shift in her? Like, what did she do so that she was suddenly feeling better about herself, where it took your intimacy to the next level?
great question, right? Because it's so funny, our social media. I mean, we do a decent amount of intimacy posts.
Yes,
Half the
you
time I
do.
always, I do that as, and I always like to give people the heads up on that is it's a marketing strategy because
Okay.
it's what's
Everybody loves
bummer
to talk
for,
about sex.
it's so, oh, it's wild. Like as I want to talk about leadership, I want to talk about like diving in the
Well,
word.
we'll
I
get
want to
there.
talk
Don't
about,
worry.
well, no, I'm not saying on here. I'm just saying on like social media.
Yeah.
But those posts do good. But like
Yeah.
I have a handful of posts that I know I can just post and I'm going to get millions of views. And
Yeah.
every single time it's about sex and 'cause
Right.
people want.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that's why I do so much on there. But it's an
Yeah.
important part of marriage. It's not all of
Absolutely.
marriage, but it's
Yeah.
definitely an important part of it.
Yeah, well,
And so,
Tommy, I will just tell you from my perspective as a divorce attorney, like that is one of, if not the most talked about issue, because when clients come in, we serve like thousands of clients. My firm is fairly large. I've been doing it for 17 years. And so, we've talked to a lot of people that are, getting divorced. And I would say that's probably from the men, and my firm happens to represent more men than women. From the men, that is probably the number one complaint is like sexless marriages. The intimacy was not there. So it's always kind of a topic that, like I kind of hone in on because I've heard about it so much through the years as a divorce attorney. And I think women underestimate how important it is in a marriage. And I think men don't necessarily know how to get to the level that they want to be at in terms of the intimacy of the marriage. So like, yeah, of course, sex sells. Like we all want to talk about sex, right? It's
yeah.
like salacious, it's juicy, it's like fun to talk about. But, when I was looking through your Instagram content, which, by the way, for our listeners and watchers, like, go follow Tommy. He has amazing content, lots of great tips on, how to keep a marriage, like, in really good health, how to keep it hot and spicy and all the things. But, I saw these posts on intimacy, and it's interesting because right before your episode, we shot an episode with a plastic surgeon, with a cosmetic surgeon. And she was talking about how, when women feel better, in her realm, it's through like cosmetic procedures, like suddenly like their husbands are like, oh, this is awesome. My wife feels better about herself. Like we can have sex with the lights on now. The lights don't have to be off. And so it's kind of like already on the forefront of my mind from talking to the surgeon. So that's why I was just curious to know, like, what was the shift in your wife that caused this positive change?
It's so similar to what you just said in a lot of those ways. And so my wife's 5'6", and now she weighs like 130 pounds. And so during that time, she was probably like bounced back and forth between 138 to 142. So not what anybody would say, oh my God, you need to lose weight, right?
Right.
But in her eyes, she didn't love herself.
Yeah.
She didn't love the way she felt about herself. Every single morning, I literally woke up to this right here. Ugh. And that'd be her standing in front of the mirror, changing her clothes 8 times, and just going back and forth because she didn't like the way what she saw into the mirror. Now, in all fairness, she wouldn't do nothing about it to change how she was feeling about herself, right?
Yeah.
She ate pretty healthy, but as kids, she'd have some bites off their plate of food because she didn't want the food to go to waste.
Right.
When she's making snacks, she'd have a couple for herself. She really wasn't doing those things. She tried working out because that's like a huge aspect of my life.
Yeah.
And every time she would go to the gym with me, she'd cry her eyes out the whole time at the gym. Well, fast forward to years later, she ended up becoming a worldwide fitness and nutrition coach. So it shows what's possible. So we've been bawling your eyes out to going and being something that becomes somebody like that.
Right.
But it was the exact same things of what you just said. There was those years where the sex was only good, right? Because we still had it. It just had to be once the kids were in bed, once the lights were out, once she didn't get any precarious positions that made maybe a roll pop up or something like that, she didn't want it. So she didn't feel comfortable taking charge in the bedroom by any means because she didn't feel good about herself. She wanted to do it because she enjoyed it, but also she wanted to make sure that I, was taken care of. And so it wasn't like this passionate dynamic. So when she started seeing herself in a different light, which was part of fitness, she started like, hey, tightening it up with what she was eating, working out, and creating other disciplines in her life that she was doing. She literally became arguably the most disciplined person in my life that I know, and I'm thankful enough to do a life with some pretty high-level people, and she became the most disciplined person. And that changed who she was. And so was it because she was overweight before? No, she wasn't. She just didn't feel good about herself because she knew she wasn't doing anything to better herself.
Right.
And like we said before, if you're not growing, you're dying. So she knew she wasn't getting any worse. She just didn't feel like, hey, I'm doing anything to earn this feel good about myself, because we're not here to just be a mom and just be a wife. That's great. Those are hard jobs. Just like saying being a dad and a father is a hard thing. We're not here to just be that. And so sometimes people stay that and they go, well, I'm just being a mom. Like, no, that's why you don't love yourself, is because you take this label and you put it on yourself and you stayed there. Then your self-worth lowers. Then when your self-worth lowers, you're not being vibrant to your husband because your mood's off, and then that changes. But to circle back, men want sex in marriage, right? What is the man doing to attract that sex?
Right.
What's the man doing to create space for his wife to be able to be in that spot, to show the fruit in his life? Is he be the most disciplined man? Is he eating perfectly clean majority of the days of the year? Does he have high-level men around himself? Is he in the word daily? Is he doing all of those things? Because if he's not, then why does he think the wife's going to do those things on those things? He has to be able to be that person and her biggest encourager, and not encourager of like, you need to work out, encourager of like, I see you, you're doing amazing, I'm so proud of you, I can't believe you're such a good mom, a wife, and you're doing this yourself. Doing all of that fills her cup. Fill her cup and watch what she does to your cup.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. And the thing about, just being a mom or a wife or whatever, I mean, oh my gosh, that is music to my ears, because that's one of the things that I preach regularly, because we see a lot of like stay-at-home moms now going through a divorce, and I'm like, if you just find a purpose beyond being a wife and a mom, like your self-esteem will go up, your confidence will go up, like life will open up to something you never even thought possible. But, I think not to, throw shade on them, I think it's fear. Like they're scared of doing that because it's been comfortable to be a wife and to be a mom and find their identity in that. But I totally agree that women in particular, like we need something beyond that to really sort of continue to grow and, to feel like we're really providing value to the world and all of those things. So I love that you say that.
Purpose is everything. Purpose,
Yes.
I can't tell you that's
Purpose
I think in
is
that same post,
everything.
that same post that you were talking about my wife's, how she felt better. At the end, I said, and the third tip is when me and you both found a deep sense of purpose in life. Because
Right.
as you heard it, I had money, I had trips, I had a
Yes.
beautiful wife, 2 healthy kids, and a house. I had the
You
American
had
dream.
all the things. Yeah.
But I didn't have purpose because I was not here to grow weed, but I'll tell you that much.
Right.
Was I good at it? Yes, but I didn't feel any purpose in it. When I found my purpose, and the only way you find purpose is one, what do you want to do in life? Like, what would make you the most happy? What do you want your marriage to look like? What do you want your
Yeah.
kids' life to look like? What do you want your friends to look like? Set the vision. Then you start putting disciplines in place. And if you follow those to a T, it will unlock what your purpose is. But until you do those disciplines, you won't find them. Just like you won't find your keys if you sit on the couch and just be like, well, maybe one day I'll think about it. Or if
Right.
you want a job and you're like, God, why aren't you giving me a job? Well, are you putting in resumes?
Yeah.
Are you developing new skill sets
You got to
that
take
might open other
action.
things?
Yeah.
100%. So
Yeah.
yeah, purpose. Find that in both people who's passionate. So many of the wives that I work with who've like, especially if they've had big transformations with us, they always say it's when my husband found his passion again for life that I became attracted to him. Not because his
Yeah.
body necessarily changed, is
Right.
because his spirit changed.
Yes. Oh, this is so interesting because we did an episode on masculinity, and that guy, we call him the manly man. He's all about like you have to serve a higher purpose to be like a real, true, awakened masculine man. Like you have to have a higher purpose, and when you have that, suddenly you garner the respect of your woman. Like never before. I mean, to a woman, like that's hot. If a guy is like really just like on fire for life, has a bigger purpose than himself, like that's super attractive to a wife.
So 100%, right? Because if I hate what I do, let's say, and I'm not so there's some people who love being an accountant, but let's say I'm an accountant and I just don't love what I do, but it pays the bills, right? And I come home and I'm just like, ugh, today was a bad day. Like, and I need a beer and I just want to sit and watch TV. My wife's not like, oh man, that's so attractive.
Right.
When you first fell in love with each other because you were interesting, you were joking, you were laughing. So as long as that keeps going because you're loving life, your wife's going to love that. You're going to inspire her to have that as well. And you can
Yeah.
encourage her to have that because you have it. But if
Right.
without that, you're just going to be, because you're spending so many hours working, you're going to die. Your spirit's going to
Right.
die. You have to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about like intimacy or, lack thereof, or sort of lukewarm intimacy sort of being like a potential issue in the marriage. What are some other common pitfalls of marriage that you have seen?
Two of the biggest things that we always say is that couples, one, they don't have the similar vision for what they want. They're pulling in different directions. The husband works a ton of hours, and it can be the women too, because obviously it's both dynamics. Work with a lot of alpha women, but the husband's working a ton of hours, right? Like, and he's going and he's got this vision. Maybe he even has purpose, right, with it, but he hasn't conveyed it to his wife because he is on that vision and purpose, and he's driving, and so he's working a ton of hours, and then he feels no respect, no appreciation, and resentment because she's not championing him and throwing it his way. Well, then she's like, all he cares about is his work.
His work.
And all of that,
Yeah.
And then she has resentment for his work. Not that, but then he goes, well, it's all for you. It's all for the
Yep.
kids and things, which a small part of it actually is. It's because it's his purpose. So it's bigger than that. He enjoys it. It's his significance. It's his validation. There's
Right.
so
It's where
many
he
parts
feels
of it.
important.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not that either of them are bad. She wants to spend time. He wants to grind. If they were on the same page, they would understand why he's doing that and why she wants those other things. They would be on the same team, moving with the waves together of life instead of on a totally dancing a different rhythm.
Right.
So getting on page number one with that. But the only way you're going to get on that is to have quality time. So I'm sure, most people probably have talked about like the 5 love languages and all of those different things. I like the 5 love languages, but they're very, very surface level and kind of amateurish. They're true, but it's almost like putting a spoiler on a car. It might make it a little bit better, but it's really not that much impactful.
Right.
when you have those 5 love languages and you get quality time to number one, which is hard for people at first because it may not be their original love language. When you make it a priority, like we said, me and my wife started going on this walk, and believe me, we were not similar type of people, had nothing in common. We literally can talk 16 hours a day, every single day, because we do work together, and literally just never ends the passionate conversations we have. So
Yeah.
it did become to become one. But when you get quality time to the number one, it doesn't got to be 3 hours a day. It can be, but if you did 20 to 30 minutes every day, no interruptions, no kids, no TV, no phones, no nothing, and you just talk, and you did that for a year straight. We did it in just a couple of months, but imagine a year straight of getting that, how much time you would actually talk. So when you come home from work that day, you share what you're going through, why maybe you're frustrated, why maybe you're short, why maybe those things are going. She knows. She's sharing what's going on in her world. You're understanding. So if she's yelling at the kids or whatever, you're not like, yo, what's wrong with this woman? You
Right.
understand. If you get quality time there, your vision will align and you will understand each other tremendously of what's going on. And then you will watch everything go to fruition. Most couples do not spend enough time. They watch TV together. That's
Yeah.
not good quality time.
No.
Maybe they're going to kids' practices together and watching their games. That's not good quality time because you're talking to the other parents.
Right.
You're going to dinner, but typically you got other friends or the kids with you. You're not really actually getting to know each other, which is always evolving and changing.
Yeah.
I have a line that I use when I keynote speak, and I start every one of my speeches like this. I always say, last year, my wife had sex with 12 different men. And then I let the pause build, right? And then I tell the ending later. But what it is my wife, I became a different man in January, February, March. And this keeps it going every single month because I kept growing. Well, as she's
Right.
seeing me growing, she's falling in love with a new man, which keeps it exciting in the bedroom and all these other things. But only way she knows I'm growing is because how? I'm spending that time with her to show her,
Right.
to talk to her, to tell her, to all those things. Then
Right.
she sees it with her eyes. Then it
Yeah.
keeps it going. So for many
Yeah.
people, they just live different lives.
Right. Yeah. So, one of the things that I'm really sort of taking away from what you're saying during this whole conversation is like how important personal development and growth is. Like, is that accurate?
100%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
many marriage coaches, they coach on conflict management and all these other things. How about if we just got to a spot where there wasn't any conflict? That would be the best conflict management there is. And I always say this, me and my wife haven't argued in 10 years. People call BS, but it's literally just the truth. What if you got to a spot where you just didn't argue? Like then you don't have to learn about the techniques and all that other stuff.
That's true. Yeah. So, okay, so let's dive deeper into that. Is it because you don't have any disagreements or you've just figured out a better way to navigate the disagreements?
So there was more so now we just don't have any disagreements, honestly, because we are, as the Bible says, two became one. We are so locked in.
Yeah.
But before we weren't always on the same page. I've just always, to a certain extent, held myself to, I would play the tape forward. If I argue with her right now, is this going to make the situation any better? Is this going to make my life better? Is this going to show the possibility for my kids? So the difference, so that this between reaction and response is a freedom to choose, right? And so in that, I've gotten really good, and same with her, to be able to, if she does say something that annoys me, to go, dude, play the tape forward. Is this going to be worth it? And so
Yeah.
where so many people, they get the body language, they roll their eyes, then their tone of voice goes up, and then all of a sudden that just takes the small little thing that's nothing and puts it to a 10,
Yes.
right? And goes those things. That's where the personal development comes in, is because you become so good at controlling your circumstances instead of having the circumstances control you, right? COVID hits, marriages go to crap, people lose their mind, they think the world's growing, and it is.
Yeah.
It was the best years of my life. And I know a lot of other people said it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It got hit with the storm and they escalated, right? They pivoted, they moved. Instead of
Right.
being like, oh, now this is all on, it's ruining my life. No, how about we just we control those circumstances? And so it's the same thing in an argument. When you become a person that is so good with who you are, all these little things in life don't bother you. Literally, and this just happened last week. My dad lives a block from us, so we're pretty decently close with him. We have a little bit of a rocky relationship from past things years ago. I literally was getting on a coaching call in 15 minutes, and he called me before and says, hey, I just found out I have bone cancer. 15 minutes before I get on coaching call. I didn't
Gosh.
say, oh my God, like, hey, I'm going to cancel this call. I didn't lay in the corner and cry, any of those things. I said, Dad, thank you for this. And I talked with them. I did this. I huddled my family up at the time. We said what we're going to do moving forward, how we're going to do this. That weekend, I was flying to Florida for a mastermind. I said, we're not canceling this. This is how we're moving because I'm not slowing down our mission. And I got on the coaching call, and it was one of the best coaching calls I ever had, right? So I controlled the situation and the circumstances rather than that controlling me and then canceling that and then breaking down and all these other things. Not saying that that's bad if you cry, but it's just showing that when you get above it, these things of the world are going to come no matter what.
Right.
But what if they just didn't knock you down?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So because I think that takes a lot of discipline, right? To be able to control your emotions in that way, particularly when you get like some bad news, some shocking news. How did you get to a place where you were able to control your emotions that well?
So I had a mentor. That's how I met Frank. And he used a line one time, and it stuck out to me. He said, and so he's a Super Bowl champion, played in the NFL. He said, amateurs base their decisions on their feelings and emotions, and professionals base their decisions on their commitments. So shout out to Steve Weatherford. And I thought to myself at that moment, and I was pretty good at handling my feelings and emotions, but if maybe something happened financially or business-wise, I'd be like, here we go again, or whatever it was, and it would impact me. Well, then I would have to reel it back in. And I thought to myself, dude, you're trying to be the best of the best, like, because we're all called for greatness, like every single one of us. Why are you being an amateur then sometimes with your feelings and emotions? Don't you want to just base it on your commitments? And I started saying, okay, let's do that. And so, I don't know if I'm sure you probably know who Alex Hormozy is. Do you know Alex Hormozy?
Oh, yes,
Big
yes,
business guy,
yes.
right? So he always talks about your business being grown on by like 1 million little golden BBs.
Yes.
He doesn't say they're grown by just these couple big bricks, right?
Right.
Well, 1 million BBs is the same thing in our lives. That's why I always encourage everybody to have. Me and my wife now have about 7 or 8 things that are our daily disciplines. But I always tell people have 3 to 4 daily disciplines that are non-negotiable in your life every single day. So when you lay your head on the pillow that night, no matter what was going on in the world that day, you know you had wins that you did that day because you had committed to those wins, and then you based them all on that. But so many people say, oh, it was just a long, busy day. It's okay. I'll do it tomorrow. Well, no, you're not a champion then. So then when you do those for years straight, one of them, as you spoke about my wife earlier, was she did 10,000 steps every single day for 2 years straight, was one of her disciplines, on top of doing other ones. Her dad died during this process of a couple of years ago of doing these daily disciplines. She had to fly across up to Oregon that day. His body was still in the house, watched him wheel it out. And during that time, she says, hey, I'll be back, guys. I'm going to get in my daily disciplines because I will not let this knock me off. And my wife was the most docile, mediocre woman that I had ever met. And now she's farther ahead, like I said, because on a day of even death, she said, no, the devil's not winning today. I will do this. And so by that was a BB that day, just another little golden BB that added up. And by that, the next time something came in her life, she said, remember last time it was death? What's going to be bigger than death? So if it's a financial thing, no big deal. I won death.
Not today, Satan. Not today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
Yeah. Cool. I love that. So what if you have a marriage where, maybe it's not the greatest and it needs help, it needs improving, but one person wants to work on the marriage and the other person does not? What do you do in that situation?
It's tough. It definitely makes it a little bit more challenging. It does take 2 to make a great marriage, but I always say it starts with 1. So at that point in time, you say, okay, well, what can I do? I can't control if she's going to start focusing on her health, like my wife, right? I can't control if she's going to be in the Word or going to church or doing anything or spending quality time with me, because I'm telling some things that do take 2. Quality time does take 2. I can't impact that. So I'm going to take a look in the mirror. First and foremost, I'm going to take ownership for everything that's happened in this relationship, because as a man, I just want to be that guy that takes ownership for everything. I'm not sure if you've ever read the book by Jocko Willink, Extreme
My favorite,
Ownership.
Extreme Ownership. Yep, 100%
Right?
personal responsibility. Yep.
Yes. then what does that do? It shows that, hey, that means I have control. Because if you don't take
Yes.
ownership, what are you doing? Control's in everybody else.
Right. I
Now
always
you
tell
can't
everybody,
change
you
it.
guys, this is the most empowering thing ever because you put everything in your control. If you choose to blame others, you're relinquishing control. So I love the concept of extreme ownership. Other people are like, yeah, but it's easier to not take responsibility. But I'm like, no. I would rather just like, I love Jocko. I love everything he stands for. Extreme ownership is probably like my favorite book. So yeah.
Amen to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so well said. And I honor you for preaching that because it's the truth. People need to
Yes.
hear it.
Yes.
And one of the number one things that I get messages from people was I challenge a lot of men, as you've seen, and those go, well, why is this always on the man?
Right.
What's the wife got to do?
Yes.
That same guy who says that probably idolizes Michael Jordan, probably loves Tom Brady, probably liked Kobe Bryant, right? And guess what? Do you think at the end of the game, Michael was like, who can I pass the ball to here?
Right.
Let me get the ball out of my... He wanted the ball. He wants to take that shot. Well, guess what? That's why we all idolize the guy because he was a gangster out there because he wanted the ball. Don't we all want the ball in our marriage? Like, why do I want to pass it to my wife? I'm not saying she's not capable, but I want the ball. And when
Right.
we know that we have Michael Jordan on your team, you want to give him the ball. So then your wife wants to give you the ball. So when you start take ownership, then do all those things that you can do to control. Change who you are so your wife sees you as different. If she
Yeah.
doesn't see you as different and becoming that man, like I was saying, my wife had sex with 12 different men, then even though maybe you're changing a little bit on the inside, but if your actions and words aren't changing, they are not noticing it. They have to see it noticed. Well, it's going to take months because you probably have years of it all on one side. You got to get the pendulum to swing and it's going to take a while. So you become somebody that's different in your habits, your words, your friendships, your routines, everything in all of those things and taking ownership. Eventually, that's your best bet to get it back. If
Right.
not, if you're saying, well, what's she willing to do? You're out. It's over with.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I saw one of your posts on Instagram and I literally was like dying laughing. And of course, again, it was back to one of the ones regarding intimacy. But you talk about like, these are the times when it's okay for a woman to initiate intimacy. Do you recall that post?
It was probably a while ago, but I do remember we've done some
And
of
it
those.
was
Yeah.
like, when your husband is, in an important meeting, when he's
Okay, that
just
was
getting
more
home from
recently, yeah,
work,
that one.
when he's having heart surgery, like, and I was just like cracking up because I think the point was like, anytime, anywhere, like it is okay for your wife to initiate intimacy, right? Like that's the point. So how important is it to a man, to a husband, for the wife to be the one to initiate? Like, is this a deal breaker or it's like, nah, if it happens, however it goes down, like that's good? Or is it truly important for the wife to initiate the intimacy?
It is important because men want to feel desired, right? Like we've talked about, like in business, a lot of times for men, we have significance idols and we want to feel significance, or maybe we didn't get it from our dad, right? And so we're trying to win approval. Our wives hold that, and intimacy is one of the best ways that men feel loved. And so if they're not like showing that desire, they may be willing. And that's nice. That's always nice too, that they're always willing. That's what my wife was. She was always willing. She just never initiated, never.
Yeah.
And so one day, this was years ago, I broke it down to her. Gosh, this was probably 5-6 years ago. And in a loving way, this is where a lot of men miss the mark. They wait till they're very mad, and then in an argument, they'll throw it in their face. You ain't gonna get the transformation in there if you do it that way.
Yeah.
So in a loving way, I said, babe, it would be nice if every now and then that you initiated intimacy. And she said, well, I know, but it's kind of your thing. You kind of tend to do it, and I just kind of like let you do it. And I'm always game. And I'm like, I know, but let's say this, babe. I said, let's just say I never initiated intimacy ever again on you. How would that make you feel? And she said, oh, I'd feel terrible. And I said, now you know how I feel. And in that moment, she said it was like a slap to the face that she had never realized before.
Yeah.
That feeling desired means the world to us.
Yeah.
And so she started taking action. Was it night and day that night? No, it took time because she wasn't mentally and physically where she needed to be at that time, but she made mental note. Now she initiates probably more than I do. And that's also because she desires me in a new way because I became a different man who wasn't growing weed and doing those dumb things. But she just knows the value of it. And so it's huge.
Yeah, interesting. So if you had to like give people a recipe, what would you say is a recipe for a successful marriage?
So I always have an order for life is what I say. And so I know some people aren't faith-filled, but I'll tell you what, I've done life without God and it doesn't work. And I've done it multiple times. And so I have a priority list that I say, if you follow this recipe, I'm not saying your life will be perfect because there is some movement to it, but good Lord, you probably have very little to no anxiety, very little to no frustration or stress. And it goes like this: God first, ourselves second, marriage third, our kids fourth, and then business fifth. Most people, right? Business is number one, kids is number two,
Yes.
maybe self or marriage is somewhere in there, but it's always towards the bottom, right?
Right.
But it's always the kids above the marriage,
Yep.
and it's always business above everything else, right?
Yes.
Well, whatever you get putting attention to is going to possibly grow. What can grow,
Yeah.
right? So if you keep the other order right, God's self-explanatory when you really do it God's way, not a believer, an actual follower, make him number one and actually so it changes your heart. Then number two, self. That's not like, hey, I'm going out with the boys and we're shooting pool and drinking beer. That's me making sure that I'm mentally, physically, and spiritually sound. So then when I show up to the marriage, I'm bringing a full cup and not an empty cup. And when I bring a full cup, that's creating space for my wife to follow that same pattern. And when she does, she brings a full cup. So now we have two full cups. And what does that do? It overflows onto the kids.
Yeah.
Do they sometimes maybe not get as much time with us? Sure. But the time they get with us, they get 100% 10 out of 10 mom and dad who are killing it in marriage and life and leading themselves and them well. So then by the time we get to marriage, then now if you look back, kids, marriage, self, and faith are on point. It don't matter what happens in business. You could be making $50 million or you could be making $150,000 a year. It's not going to change anything because you're so enough in what your life is. Your marriage is so good. Your kids are good. You're good. Don't matter at the money at that point in time. I'm not saying go get the bag. Go get it. It's cool. But only when the inside and all of that's good first. Without that, the outside don't matter.
Yeah.
So when you get that and then business is there, you'll show up in your business so on fire, with so much clarity, so much peace that you'll get so much more done in a less amount of time that you'll kill it there, and your finances have no other reason but to go up because of that.
Yeah.
You keep that order and you do not get out of that order, good things will happen in your life.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so true. Well, that sounds like an amazing point to end on, a very positive, motivational high note. Tommy, thank you so much for being with us today. So if people, are listening to this and they're like, this sounds really good, I feel like my marriage could use, a little oomph, like what's the best way for people to find you?
Best way, I love social media, so it's just Tommy McCollister on Instagram. That's the best way. DM me on there. Check out the content. You can also go to my website. It's highlevelhusband.com. Go check out some of this stuff. We have one-on-one coaching, but then we also have an amazing community that we're actually just releasing that has an insane amount of value that's affordable to everybody. But if you want to work with me, there is a nice little price point to that. So whatever you're looking for, there is something there. I'll just say, do not wait until you're about to go see Holly, because at that point in time, you might not make it. So
Yeah, that's so true. So true. Yes. Thank you so much for being here today. This was fantastic.
yeah, thanks, Holly. Hopefully we kept it hot.
Indeed. I've got more to say. Do you know that the partner you choose in life, your husband or wife, you are going to end up having roughly 40,000 meals with this person. You're going to spend roughly 700 days of vacation with this person. You're going to wake up next to this person roughly 25,000 times. Do you know how critical the partner that you choose in your life is to your well-being? It is nearly impossible to show up as the best version of yourself if you don't show up with the right person, or the person you're with make that relationship right. Like, your marriage is so critical to your entire well-being. Subscribe, comment, give us a heart, do all the things, and never forget, you were made for more.